Okay, here we're going to talk about some viruses causing infections of the skin. And these pictures are showing herpes zoster or shingles types of rashes. Now, herpes zoster is the same virus that causes chickenpox, of course. And so there are some pretty famous viruses that can cause skin rashes. We have our measles, which is going to be known as rubeola virus, and this can cause a rash. We have rubella, which is known as German measles, and this is also going to be more mild than our hard measles, but it can still also lead to a rash on the face, trunk, and limbs. Chickenpox, varicella zoster, as well as shingles, these are both going to be associated with rashes. Chickenpox is going to be a generalized, very itchy rash, and then your shingles are going to be more of a concentrated rash, typically on some form of the trunk, on the back or chest or side. Smallpox has been eliminated, but these used to develop into very raised fluid bumps with a dimple in the middle. And then warts are going to be caused by human papillomavirus. We typically think of human papillomavirus associated with cervical cancer and as a sexually transmitted disease, but there are human papillomavirus variants that can infect the skin and cause dermal warts. Now, these viruses still have the same constraints that apply to bacteria. They still have to find access to our body, be able to get in and cause these infections. And also, several viral infections, as we know, start somewhere else and end somewhere. So measles, for example, and chickenpox are respiratory. You contract them the respiratory tract, and then they will disseminate and cause their skin infections or their rashes. Now, with respect to measles, measles has many different types of presentations, and a rash is one of them. These are single-stranded RNA. We have German measles, which can last for a very short period of time. It's a mild form of the disease. And then we have hard measles, and that's going to last for approximately 3 weeks. It's going to be associated with an infection of CD4 T cells, so there is going to be a transient immune suppression that can last up to 6 months. And it's in this time period where people typically succumb to measles or measles associated because they get a secondary bacteria infection and pneumonia. Measles is going to have Koplik spots on the tongue. These are the spots shown here on the actual tongue. And then it's going to present very quickly after these spots form with the rash. Of course, there is a vaccine available. It is the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, MMR. Now, after the Koplik spots form, you get this macular papular rash, and it's going to be very flat and raised. It's not going to be itchy. You have some rare complications, so 1 in 1,000 will develop an encephalitis. Again, measles is able to disseminate into other areas of the body. A very rare complication that occurs usually at many months after you've actually contracted the disease is subacute sclerosing panencephalitis. And this is going to be inducing brain inflammation. And this is often a very fatal complication of measles. Now, another infection of the skin is chickenpox. And if I just show the difference between the different rashes, you can see that the measles rash is going to be very flat, and it's the bumps sort of meld into each other. Whereas in chickenpox, these are going to be very marketed spots. They are going to be very itchy and often associated with scarring. So varicella zoster virus is the chickenpox virus. It is not a pox virus. It is a herpes. So it's in the herpes family. It's going to, again, be spread through the respiratory tract, and then you're just going to disseminate into the rash, and the rashes are going to be very itchy. Shingles is the latent form of the virus, and the virus likes to hang out in the dorsal root ganglia, and so reactivation due to many different potential inputs is going to cause these viruses to become reactivated, and they're going to replicate in the sensory neurons. And then shingles rash is going to be similar to chickenpox in its presentation, except for it's going to be more localized. So shingles has a localized area of the rash. It's typically going to be in the trunk. The lesions are going to be painful. The virus is hanging out in your nerves, so when they get reactivated, they're going to damage your nerves. That's going to be painful. You can have multiple organ involvement, dissemination of the virus in people with compromised immunities, and this tends to have a high mortality rate in these individuals. And there are some treatments for this, acyclovir, for example. It is a herpes virus, so we do have nucleoside analogs for herpes viruses. Herpes simplex virus 1 can cause infections of the skin. These are going to, again, be latent infections, reactivation. There are a lot of people infected worldwide with herpes simplex virus 1, and about 90% of the population in developing countries do have some sort of antibody to this virus. Important, this is a human-to-human transmission. We are the only reservoirs. It does not hang out in any other animal. Now, this is going to target our epithelial cells. You're going to get typically necrosis at the site of infection. And it's going to have a latency in which, again, it's going to have an affinity for nerves, a common theme of some of these herpes viruses. They can cause a rare eye infection in which it can potentially be a cause for blindness. Now, finally, we'll talk about our human papillomaviruses. There are many strains of human papillomaviruses, and some can cause cervical cancer. Their warts are going to be a variable in their appearance and location. It's going to have the ability to be transmitted sexually in the case of our cervical warts, or it can be transmitted by fomites. So the bacteria can dry on a surface and someone can pick it up and expose their skin to it, for example. Genital warts are going to be sexually transmitted, and it's going to typically take about 8 to 20 months before visible signs develop of the actual infection. Now, dermal warts are also going to be caused by human papillomavirus. And one of the reasons is because your virus, HPV viruses, are able to mobilize keratin. So they cause excess keratin to develop in the epidermis. And this is what's going to actually produce that hard, sort of rough wart. Now, this is going to enter a break in the skin. Again, it has to have some sort of access. So if you have no breaks in the skin, you're not going to get infected with this virus. And it has a 1 to 4 week incubation period before the warts actually develop. And the same thing, it is going to be treatable. There's also a vaccine for human papillomavirus, which is going to prevent the cervical cancer, the human papillomavirus that can be sexually transmitted.